So, Julian, I want to ask you what myths are out there about credit cards? Because there's a lot of disinformation out there, and some of it's actually good information too, right? You know, credit card's good, credit card's bad. A lot of finance gurus have made a lot of money talking about the evils of credit cards, right? So, me being the contrarian I am, we like to take an opposing take here. So, you're a credit card guy. Tell me, what are the myths out there about credit cards?
Yeah, Stephen, you really nailed it. There is a lot of bad information, especially out on social media. I think that the biggest myth is that credit cards are inherently bad.
Okay.
I think, like any tool in the toolbox, a credit card is what you do with it. You can do good things with it and you can do bad things with it. Obviously, the bad things are if you are not disciplined, if you get yourself in debt, if you spend more than you can afford to, if you do not pay your bill fully on time. But assuming that you can be a disciplined person, credit cards are one of the greatest financial tools in the world. Not only can you move your expenses
Really?
around,
One of the greatest.
I
Okay.
would say so, because you can
Defend yourself, sir. Some people are going to come after you. I know I got some Dave Ramsey listeners.
not at all. Yeah, no, I know. Dave Ramsey and I don't really agree on this. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. No, I really do think they are, because
Okay.
first, putting aside all the perks, all the rewards, and all of that, just putting that all aside, just being able to track your spend people will say, oh, well, if it comes out of my bank account immediately, then I know I spent it. Okay, but do you have a record of everything you spend that you can look at the end of the month, that you
Okay.
can look at by category, as a credit card company will split it up for you if you want, and say, oh my gosh, look how much I spent on restaurants. Look how much, or,
Mm,
we could be easily putting more into groceries and spend a lot less. I think the amount of control that you can have, and really analysis, that you won't get from just using cash, right? If you use cash, it just goes, and a lot of people don't track at all where their cash is going. They
right.
should, but it's hard. Even when I do occasionally have to use cash, I'll look back a week later and say, where did that $20 go? I know I spent it somewhere, but where did it go? If you're using a credit card, you know where it went.
Well,
So
it's funny you say that because there is an internet trend right now about, oh gosh, I'm butchering how this is, but basically it's like how girls think about money, how guys think about money, like the differences. I'm totally losing like what they call it, but like they'll go, and I've seen this with women. They'll be like, oh yeah, no, I bought it. Don't worry, it was, I bought this new pillow at the store. Don't worry, it was free. And then the guy
right,
will be like, what do you mean it was free? And the woman will be like, well, I use cash, so it's not coming out of the bank account. Girl math. That's what it is. Girl math, boy math. And it's like, well, I use cash, so it's free because it's not in the bank account. I didn't see
right,
it leave. So it
right.
just plays into exactly what you're talking about, this mentality. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah, I do believe it's a terrific financial tool. Again, though, like any tool, you can use it correctly or you can use it poorly. And if you use it poorly, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Okay, so let me
And
play devil's advocate here real quick. So I totally agree with everything you just said, but why can't I just accomplish the exact same thing with a debit card instead of using cash? Then I don't have to worry about a cashback limit. And then I can get on an online tool, like I use Monarch Money, and I pay them a subscription. And then I'm able to get all the same, trends and categories and things like that. So why not just use that and, have to worry about, getting into credit card debt?
yeah, two reasons. One is that, and yes, again, if you don't use the credit card right, you'll get into debt. So let's continue this conversation, assuming that you have control over your life and
Okay.
that you know what to spend. I always say, when you use a credit card, don't use it for anything that you wouldn't have bought with a debit card or cash anyway.
Okay.
Don't go out and say, oh, I
I
have a
like that.
credit card and therefore I should just spend this. That's not
Yeah.
the way to do it. But
Just because you got a $5,000 credit card limit does not mean you now have $5,000.
and you really shouldn't be thinking about it in the terms of a limit in the first place. You should be thinking about
That's
it
a really good point. Yes.
right. Yeah, you should be thinking about of I need to spend this money.
The same could be said of getting any kind of loan, like with
That's
your
right.
mortgage. Just because you're pre-approved for $400,000 on a home does not mean you should spend $400,000 on a home. So
That's
yeah,
exactly
totally
right. You
with you.
should buy as much home as you can personally afford within your budget and within your parameters. That's right. But to your original question of why use a credit card instead of a debit card, I'll give you two reasons.
Come.
One is that a credit card will provide all sorts of protections against damage, against travel issues, that sort of
Yes.
thing, that a debit card will not. And the second is that a debit card doesn't offer at this point any rewards. And the reason for that goes back to the Dodd-Frank Act that it was enacted after the recession of 2008. And so banks no longer, it's not lucrative for them to offer significant rewards on a debit card. So if you're using a debit card instead of a credit card, you're not getting any of those advantages. You're really, in my opinion, leaving money or rewards on the table that you could be earning for free. So why would you do that? Why would you leave money on the table?
No, it's a great point. And I'm doing a bad job playing devil's advocate here, but I am going to tack on one to you with protections, because This is a very real reason that's a part of my strategy. If you or anybody else has ever had a bank account hacked, or your PayPal or anything like that, my wife, before we met, she had a PayPal account and somebody hacked it and spent $4,000 on it. Well, her debit card was tied to it. The reality is, when it's a debit card and it's tied to your bank account, it takes a long time. Like, I'm talking 3 to sometimes 9 months in order for all of that to get reconciled, you be able to get your money back, prove it was hacked, all this other stuff. It does not happen fast. So, it took her about 6 months to get her $4,000 back. If you spend that on a credit card, those credit card companies, as a part of the interest that they are charging you, take that into account. And there are protections that you can get, and you will literally get that. I've had situations happen with me, and it's like I literally had the money back after filing claims within 48 hours. So that's another aspect of the protections that I did want to highlight, because it's like, listen, there's an element of insurance here that protects you against scams. And that's something I think is super important nowadays. So
that is 100% correct. And I will add one other thing that along those lines. Remember, if you're using a credit card and you have fraud, it's not your money out of your bank yet, right? You haven't paid the bill. So if you dispute it and say, this was not me, you don't pay the bill, then you haven't lost the money. Versus a debit card, or like the situation you described, that money was your money. Now you have to get it back. So the shoe is on the other foot. It's up to the bank to get their money back, or to really cancel the charge is what they'll do. And of course, it's easier for them to do that because they haven't paid the merchant yet either. It's really up to the merchant to have determined whether that card was being used fraudulently or not. A lot of merchants don't go through all the steps and are willing to eat the fraud for whatever reason. That's up to them. But in any case, as a consumer, it's definitely a situation where you have the leverage with a credit card versus a debit card.
Absolutely. So let's keep going down this path. Okay. So we're talking credit cards. And now specifically, you are a travel points guy. You've been, in lots of different magazines. I believe a couple different, well-known channels. I thought CNBC, one of my favorites. I saw you on there. So, talk to me about travel credit cards, because clearly this has been your niche area. I used to be a cashback guy and was 100%, look, I just want the flexibility of, I get 2% cash back. I can spend it on anything I want. There's no limitations. I didn't know much about the travel space at the time. I thought, maybe you get like a 10, 20% discount when you travel on tickets or whatever, but that was about probably the best. I knew they changed like mileage caps on you, like how far the miles could go. So it's like, I had a very like basic understanding, and it wasn't even a proper one, of the points world. I've since then very recently changed everything to a travel points one. Colin Stroud, had him on the podcast, and that was very eye-opening. I think I recommended them to meet up with you. I don't know if you reached out yet, so let's talk about this more, because I find the points economy essentially very fascinating, because I am always looking for arbitrage. And anytime I can find an element of arbitrage that allows my buck, whether that buck is $1 or whether that buck is 10,000 American Airlines points, go further. So talk to me a little bit about this. Why should I consider, if I'm going to get a credit card, why should I consider going with a credit card that gives me travel points?
So you just nailed it. It is all about arbitrage. Okay. And with all arbitrage, in my opinion, that you have to put in a little extra work to get the benefit of what you're doing. It's
okay. So let me ask you this right before we get into it. Okay. Yep. Because I value time. All right. So I don't want to lose people right here off the bat. They may be like, okay, I get it. I'm getting ready to switch the episode off because I'm sure you can find stuff, but I don't have hours to sit around and like just go searching for the best deal. So right off the bat, let's nip this in the bud. How much time when you're planning a trip or looking for a flight or anything, when we say it takes a little bit of time, give me a ballpark. What are we talking about?
Well, that's the beauty of it, is that there are now tools like my own PointsPath that speed all of this up for you.
Okay.
Right. In the old days, yes, you would definitely have to spend hours and hours searching for a flight. And also in the old days, airlines only released so many seats with awards, points, and things like that. All of that has changed.
Okay.
Airlines now release almost all of their seats with some sort of points. Now, the way they do it, instead of restricting availability, is they increase the number of points based on demand. So you do have to keep that in mind. But you can usually find a seat to where you want to go, especially on the U.S. airlines. All the U.S. airlines essentially make all their seats available and just vary the amount of points or miles you need. But then beyond that, you can use the tools like PointsPath, and there are other competitors as well, to quickly determine, is this something that I should be working with my points, or should I just be paying cash? That's what PointsPath does, just to do a quick plug. It's a browser extension. It runs in Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. And when you install it, then whenever you search for flights with Google Flights, Google gives you all the flight results, say New York to LA on November 5th or whatever it might be. You get all the cache results from Google. PointsPath inserts all of the points prices from all the major U.S. carriers and then tells you for each flight which is the better deal. Should you use cash? Should you use miles? Is it a good deal? Is it a great deal? It gives you the information. Takes about 5 to 10 seconds at most.
Okay.
So
I can invest that much time for a better deal.
Right. Right. So,
and I saw the interface on this, by the way, very clean interface. I'll be downloading it myself for Chrome, but just so everybody in the audience knows, like, how much does it cost?
It's free. We do work.
It's my favorite price.
I know, that's the best price ever, right? We work on a free.
And don't worry, everybody. I'll have this plugged in the show notes. So if you're wondering, like I always tell people, normally we get to this stuff at the very end, but because it's relevant, we're talking about it. Don't worry. You can check the show notes. It'll all be there. But please continue.
Yeah, no, so the basic product is free. What I just described, that all is free. We do have advanced features that we have subscriptions tiers for. But for a lot of people, the basic free product is all they'll need, especially if they're only traveling a couple of times a year or whatever it might be. They don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles. They just need to answer the question, where can I find a flight that I can use my points on, and is it a good deal or not? That's really the two questions we're trying to answer with it.
Does it do anything with hotels yet?
Not yet. Not yet. It's on our roadmap, but we haven't gotten there.
2.0 coming. Okay.
2.0, exactly.
Because I know that's something that's big for me. Like the plane ticket matters, kind of a thing. But for like me and my wife, well, specifically more her, I can camp anywhere. Like I'm good. But like for her, it's like flying business class is nice. Like that's great. Get a little extra legroom. I'm 6 feet. To me, that's even nicer. It can get a little cramped in some of those economy ones. But the real value for her, I know, is also in like staying in a really nice hotel. Like that's what she really enjoys. So, so as we're going through this, I want to hear about flights, but please, plug anything, alongside the hotels as well, because I know that's something that a lot of people care about too.
Yeah, and we could definitely talk about hotel points. They're obviously not as popular as flights. Flights sort of is the big leading, the one that people think about is when they think about frequent flyer miles. The other issue with hotels gets a little trickier because unlike the airlines own all their planes or lease them, but they're all controlled by a single company. Hotel brands are usually all under just a chain brand, but are owned by individual owners, the actual properties. So that makes making a program consistent a little more tricky. Okay. And the points are generally worth less. That's not 100% always the time, but people usually focus on flights first. But
so
I agree with your wife.
Is the better strategy for people who like to travel, a little bit more often, is the better strategy because so for me, I just got the Capital One VentureX card. Is the better strategy because if I'm saying this correctly, because I just got it, I believe it's hotels I get 10x the points on. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, through Capital One Travel. Yes.
Through the Capital One Travel. Okay, so if I book it through the Capital One Travel, I get the 10x points. So in this kind of a scenario, if I'm kind of working out my travel strategy with all of this, it would be better. The better arbitrage is going to be to pay for the hotels, get those 10x points, and then to apply that to flights. Is that kind of what I'm catching from you?
That would definitely be a good strategy.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now again, you want to look at it, but certainly what you probably don't want to do is transfer your Capital One points to a hotel program, because you'll probably get less value for them that way versus transferring them to an airline. That is correct.
When you
I'm being
say
very
less
broad.
value, like what kind of let's talk about what's possible here, because I think a lot of people, like I said, myself included, still learning a lot about this. Like what are we talking about? Again, I used to think it was like maybe 10% off, but maybe break it down for me. Like, I know it's very dependent on deal, but give me some examples of like what you're seeing in the flights versus the hotel spaces, and we can kind of, compare them.
Yeah, we in fact we just did a joint report on holiday flights with the Points Guy, where we analyzed,
great.
yeah, where we analyzed over 7 million flights in our Points Path database and looked at what the value was across programs, both through all of 2024 and then specifically in the holiday period.
I love data points.
Yeah, data points are great. So the first thing is that if you're talking about a currency, just as for instance, and we can dig into this a little bit, like Alaska Airlines miles, we're seeing you're getting about 1.6 cents per mile with Alaska miles.
Okay.
So that would basically be if you said, well, with cash back, I can get 1 cent per point. That's a fairly standard rate. You're getting 60% more if you're going through Alaska on average. Not every deal is going to be 60%.
And for everybody out there, you have to think about this stuff in terms of percentages. Because if you think, well, 1.6, like it doesn't feel like a lot. It's like that's 60 cents more. It's like, no. That's 60% increase. That's massive.
That's right.
So I love the fact that you broke it down in percentage.
$1,000 ticket and you're saving $600. Right.
That's huge.
That's correct. Exactly. It's a lot of money. And then as you go down, we list all the different programs. American and United are worth a little bit less, more around 1.3, 1.4. And then you get to Delta, where you're only at about 1.1 in general. So that's where you're seeing that 10%. And Delta's fairly consistent about.
Well, that makes sense, because Delta and American are my primary hubs, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, the bad news on Delta is you're not really going to get outsized value for your Delta miles under almost any situation. The good news is you'll pretty consistently get to 1.1 cents per point.
I mean, I'm still not complaining about 10% off on the price of a ticket.
It's still 10%. And if you do have a Delta credit card, then you get an additional 15% off of that when you're redeeming your points, if you have a Delta American Express credit card. But that's it's fairly consistently, that's what it is. You're not going to find real outsized value beyond that. So then once you kind of have an idea, and by the way, we list all of these values on pointspath.com in our frequently asked questions. Again, we have our joint report with the Points Guy. Points Guy also has valuations of their own. And we're all in roughly the same ballpark, frankly. But so you can easily look and say, all right, well, which miles should I be collecting? But then to go back to what you just asked about the Capital One Venture card, that's a great card because those miles can either be redeemed direct for travel through Capital One, or can be redeemed against any travel costs that you charge to your card, or can be transferred to any of Capital One's airlines and hotel partners. And that's another way you can get huge value for your points by saying, you got to remember, all these airlines are partners with each other.
Right.
So if you're looking for a United flight, you might actually find a better price for it in miles with Air Canada. You say, well, I don't have any Air Canada miles, but those Capital One miles will transfer to Air Canada miles at a 1-to-1 ratio. This is where I say it does require a little bit of time, but here's the thing. Once you learn it, you know it. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but then once you learn it, you're like, oh, yeah, okay. I know United and
it's Canada, for most people, too, it's like you probably travel to, you look over the years, you probably travel to, just a handful of places for the most part. Like for us, it's like, yeah, I might have a work trip here or there. I'm starting to travel a little bit more now that I'm doing speaking. But it's like, for the most part, for our personal travel, it's like maybe we do a random vacation a year, but we like going to Mexico. So we know that's relatively constant over the years. We have family up in Wisconsin, so we're going to be going to Wisconsin. So it's like there's going to be a decent amount of it for the majority of people that it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to the same places. So you'll pick it up pretty quickly.
And not only that, like you just mentioned a few minutes ago, you said, oh, well, my airlines are Delta and American because that's pretty much where you live. So you would fairly quickly learn, okay, well, Delta's the main partners I'm probably going to find excess value on are Air France and Virgin Atlantic. And the American partner that I'm going to find most miles on, frankly, is Alaska. So
Okay.
once you learn it, they don't really change very often. So once you know it, then you know it, and then it's fairly easy to look with the tool like PointsBet.
So what is it? So if I'm somebody who's interested in signing up for a credit card, what is the way that you go about recommending it? Whether I go with the Delta Sky Miles card, one of these other ones, or you go with a third party like a Capital One or something. How do you recommend that people go about evaluating what the best choice for them? Do you start with the closest airport hubs to you? What's the best thing to do?
Yeah, the first thing I always say is if it's your first travel credit card, probably don't get an airline credit card
Okay.
unless you really are committed to a particular airline. Like if you're already flying Delta all the time, and in that case you're probably a Delta Elite and maybe you don't even need their credit card.
Okay.
But usually, as a beginner, you're best off with one of two cards. One is that Capital One Venture card,
Okay.
and the one you have is the X. I think you said that's the more expensive.
I have the more
version.
expensive one. Yes.
Yes. You don't need, if you don't want the lounge access and you don't want to pay the extra fee, you can just get the regular one. It's $95 a year.
Yeah.
And
that I think would work for most people. I wanted the extra boost on stuff. That was it.
Absolutely. And I also say if you want the perks and you're going to use them, by all means, spend the money. The other card, and I'm sure you've heard of it, is the Chase Sapphire Preferred.
That was the other one I was considering. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Those are the best starter cards. Those are the way I tell people to start. And the reason is very simple. The points are easy to redeem. Both programs have good sets of airline and hotel partners. You can also easily redeem the points right on the bank's website and get value for them. And they usually come with good sized bonuses to start you off. So,
and just to share a quick experience, me and my wife just had our 10th year anniversary. She's a saint, sticking up, hanging out with me for this long. So we just had our 10th year anniversary 2 weeks ago, and we went to Maine. Well, when we went there, and again, adding to the insurance, because, you read the fine print on these, there's a lot of stuff that these cards come with that protect you, like travel insurance, car insurance, different things like that a regular debit card won't. So when I went, I booked everything through the Capital One Venture portal, plane tickets, hotels, where we were staying, all this other stuff, got all these extra points for all these different places we were doing. So, essentially additional discounts on where we're staying. And then when we landed in Portland, Maine, never seen this before, but something was going on 3 of the 6 car rental agencies they had, and the lines were backed out of the door. I've traveled a decent amount. I've never seen car rental agencies that backed up. Well, we had 3 hours to drive, and we had a dinner plan and like all these other things. So after waiting for almost an hour and not moving like at all, I called up Capital One. They have a concierge hotline. Called them up, said, "Hey, I know I already booked this. It's paid for, all this other stuff. Can I cancel it and get on with a different car rental agency? There's 3 other agencies here that have nobody in line out,"
right.
Kind of a thing. And then they worked with me. And then they said, "Yeah, we got it. You're canceled." Boom. And it was like an easy 5 minutes. And then, everything else got worked out and we were able to get out of there pretty quick. So there's other benefits that I learned pretty quickly, after only having that card for 2 months and going on one trip with it. So that's a big thing.
The time value of money or the value of time. Yeah, right there, right? You pay an extra for that card, but you just saved yourself a ton of time.
Oh, tons
by getting on the card. And you probably wouldn't get that service on the cheaper card.
And I booked it with Hertz, and with the Capital One, with the upgraded one, you automatically get booked into like their presidential club or whatever it is. So we got an even night, even though the car was a little more expensive than the other one I was getting. It was like a $1,200 rental. We ended up getting for like $750 because I was in that elite status that I otherwise wouldn't have been in without the card. So yeah, a lot of additional perks that, really start to add up when you calculate it all in.
Yeah. But again, though, you need to be able to use them. If you don't travel, don't get a travel card.
Great point. Case in point. If you don't go anywhere, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not a traveler or, you fly once every 5 years, probably not a travel card for you. In that case, get a cashback card. Keep it simple but certainly get something. Don't use a debit card. Get a cashback card. Get a no annual.
What's the minimum? What's the minimum to what the break even between cashback and credit card that you would recommend somebody? Is it I fly once or twice a year max to go visit my mom in a different state. Like what's the bare minimum that you would recommend that it would normally be worth it?
There's a phrase that we use sort of, and I've been doing this for 15 years, this frequent flyer miles and in the points and miles community, as we call it. There's a phrase that we say, earn and burn. Basically, you should not be earning points that you are not burning fairly quickly.
Okay.
Some people earn points and they sit on them for years. I'm going to have a retirement trip. That's a terrible idea. The reason is because points devalue the same way cash does. A point today is worth more than a point tomorrow. And the way that happens is the airlines and hotels raise the prices over time. So it costs more.
There's point-inflation, just like we have inflation on the dollar. Right. So as their stuff gets more expensive, they have to adjust for how many points something is costing. So that makes complete sense. What's the longest you would recommend? Because I was looking at a couple different places and I was like, oh, this place in St. Lucia, we've always wanted to go there. This hotel looks really cool. I was just looking at some of the things on the portal, and I was like, wow, based off our current expenses, I could hold these for 2 years and then pay for that entire trip, in points, basically. What's like the longest that you would recommend somebody hold on to points?
Yeah, no, that's about it. 2 or 3 years, I would say, because it does take time to earn points. Of course, you're not going to, suddenly have 500,000 points overnight. Okay. But yes, I would say you should have a plan to burn them within the next 2 or 3 years, whether it be ongoing short trips or one big vacation, whatever it's going to be. Do not hold them for 5 or more years. They will not be worth the same 5 years from now.
Got it. Okay, so definitely not try not to do more than 3.
A couple of years at most.
And look, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, okay? If you are somebody who's not traveling once every 3 years, you need to be somebody who is, okay? So, I'll go ahead and say it for you. A huge part, especially if you're married, right? It's like, so many people nowadays, you're seeing the shift from this materialism to experientialism. I don't know if that's a word. I'm making it up. Experientialism actually it might mean something else, but you get what I'm saying. It's like we're choosing, experiences over, material things more often in our generation. A lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of people, in our generation can't afford a lot of the material stuff their parents could. Yeah. But that being said, this aligns really well with that value shift because I would argue it wouldn't matter. I do think experiences across all time are worth more than the majority of material possessions. And because of that, I would encourage people to be like, look, you really need to consider this, especially if you're somebody who doesn't travel. It doesn't mean that you need to be going over and gallivanting into Europe or something or anything like that. It's like, look, do you guys just have a beach that you like to go to and a hotel? It's like, okay, use these points to give yourself the excuse to have more experiences. Because cash back, it's super easy to just throw that back onto your bank account balance, right? But if you're somebody who's like, having experience with the person that I love the most on this planet is really important to me, then this is the perfect excuse to rack up points you can only spend on travel. So I will make the case for it there. I think that there's really something to be said about that.
Listen, Steven, you're preaching to the choir with me. I think it's great that the younger generation values experiences more than material things, because look, memories last longer than a PlayStation. They do. Right. You have those memories the rest of your life. That PlayStation, will be obsolete in 5 years. It is a better way to live life. You not only that, you meet other people, you see other cultures, you see how people do things differently, and also the same, which is the really fascinating part. At the end of the day, we're all human beings existing in this world. So I agree. And it is great that, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, only 5% of the U.S. population had a passport. And recently it's up to 50%. That really shows you how
it's up to 50% now?
50% of the US population now, or 47, something very close to 50%.
Now, I am going to give a big American middle finger to some Europeans who just heard that stat and were like, oh, you uncultured swine of an American. It's like, okay, listen, we're like 3 times the size of Europe, okay? And going from Florida to freaking New York is the equivalent culturally of doing Germany and Spain. Okay. So it's like, we just don't need a passport to travel as much as you guys do. All right. So that being said, I do love certain parts of Europe and everything. I think it's great. So
Yeah, no, you're right. The U.S. itself is made up of so many different cultures. Even just getting out and seeing them, and going from the south to the northeast to the
it's why it's
west.
the greatest
Absolutely.
experiment ever. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I always laugh whenever we compare anything, education or healthcare or all this other stuff to some tiny little, it's like Norway. It's like Norway isn't even as big as Florida. Okay. It's like one population density is like 1/4 the size or something like that. It's pretty monoculturalistic for the most part. It's like, do you know the melting pot that just this state is that I live in? It's crazy. So it's like, it's comparing apples to oranges just by state, let alone an entire country. That's, so whatever. So we've got plenty of problems, right? But I still maintain that, hey, the USA is still one of the greatest experiments in history. So we'll take it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And look, if you want to know how vast America is, just fly over it. Just go from the East Coast to the West
That's a
Coast,
great point.
spend
Oh,
5,
yeah.
6 hours and look down, look out the window, and you'll just see the different land, the way it changes.
Every time I go to the West Coast, I am always, I'm like you. I'm like a little kid. Because again, Florida guy, flat land everywhere. We've got all the beaches and water you could ever want. But the second I start looking down and I start seeing these ripples in the landscape, and it's like, oh, those are mountains. Like,
yeah, right? Yeah.
It's just totally different. It's absolutely amazing. I just love the fact that our country has such diverse, like you said, cultures, landscapes, even within it. It makes traveling so exciting. I mean, that was one of the reasons we wanted to go to Maine, was because I was like, I don't really get to experience fall very much. The whole
not in Florida,
changing of the leaves.
Yeah.
It's like our leaves just die and then fall off. We don't get the red leaves or anything like that. And I love skiing and snowboarding, so I've done winter. So it's like I've done the extremes, the snow and the hot, but it's like I don't get to see that in between a lot. So that's why we went in October, and oh man, it was just such an amazing experience. So yeah, it's one of those things. We live in an amazing world. Again, whether you have a passport or not, or whether you desire to go overseas or not, it doesn't really matter. It's like, I always think of Parks and Rec. You ever watch that TV show?
I've seen a couple episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's this guy in there. He's like the boring guy, right? That doesn't know much. And he's not a very attractive guy at all, but his wife is like smoking hot and nobody can figure out why she married him. And he always talks about her and he's like, yeah, because the show is somewhere in Indiana, wherever they are. But he's like, yeah, me and Gail, we love going to our favorite place together. It's a little place in Muncie, which is just another small town in Indiana. So it's like, that's where you travel with your wife? So, but even he could probably use some rewards points.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit, what got you into all of this? Because I don't think you were probably growing up one day and said, Mom, I want to be a travel points guy. And I know you didn't major in it in college. So talk to me a little bit about, what fueled this passion for you to kind of get into this and then eventually turn it into a career.
Yeah, it like most journeys in life, it has twists and turns, right? And you don't necessarily end up where you think you're going to be. When I was going to college and even in high school, I always wanted to be in television and film. And that is the career that I started in, and actually did for about 20 years. I lived in Los Angeles. I was a writer. I was a director. I did films. I did television shows, et cetera, et cetera.
Big Hollywood sign in the background. I see where it was coming from then.
Yeah. So one of the last jobs I did, or one of the later jobs I did in my career there, was I was actually a director for World Wrestling Entertainment for 2 years.
Interesting. Okay.
WWE On the Road. I directed all of the backstage scenes, all the locker room stuff, all of those.
Very
vignettes.
Cool.
Yes, it was. It was a great job. And as part of that job, though, I was traveling every week because we were doing the show Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown at a different arena every week, or usually in the U.S., but sometimes even overseas. So in 2010, I flew upwards of 200,000 miles. It was a lot. Needless to say, you very quickly learn all about frequent flyer miles when you're doing a job like that.
To put that back into context for people, I think the world is a little over 8,000 miles around. Is that about right?
Yeah, something like that. It was a
So
lot
so
of fun.
you just casually in 1 year flew around the world. I don't even know how many times that is, but a lot.
It was a lot. I will say my back wasn't loving it at the end, but everybody at WWE knows their frequent flyer miles because
Okay,
everybody is doing this travel schedule. So everybody, there's this
makes sense.
subculture there where people are talking about, hey, are you going for a Delta Elite? Are you going platinum? Because I'm thinking American Exec Plat. Like, there's a whole little subculture going on. Anyway,
I
when
feel
I
like there
did
was a massively missed like endorsement by like Randy Savage or something like that.
right, yeah.
I don't care, Hulk Hogan or something. I don't care about your credit card cash back. I want to see the mile, something like that. Sorry, bad impression.
No, but somebody should think about that at one of the banks or airlines. You're
Yeah,
right.
totally.
Yeah, because I bet some of those guys would be happy to do it because they have everyone's got strong opinions
Oh, the
about
John
who they like.
Cena commercial writes itself, right? He's checking into the line with his credit card points, getting ready to get on the plane, and they're like, "Who? Where's this? Who's checking in? Who is this for?"
So I did that. I did that for about 2 years, and that's about all you need to do for wrestling, unless you want to do it forever. 2 years is
Yeah,
enough.
that makes sense.
But when I did leave, then I had all this knowledge, and I had experience with writing from my time in Hollywood, and I kind of was ready to move into a different chapter. So I started writing about frequent flyer miles at smaller blogs, and this
Okay,
was again about
and this
15
is right
years
around
ago.
2010.
Yeah, right around
Okay.
2010. This was, yeah. So it was actually a fairly small space at the time.
Yep.
And so I wrote for a blog at the time that was called Hack My Trip, which is a great name. And from there, I moved to a bigger blog, and then I moved to the Points Guy and was in fact a writer there, and eventually became the editorial director at that site.
Mm.
And then from there, I moved to CNN and started their travel rewards e-commerce site, covering credit cards, travel rewards, and all of that. Built that
Interesting.
up from zero. Yeah. So that's what my journey was. And I will say this, Stephen, through all of that, I always loved that we were helping people use their rewards better.
Mm.
But I wanted to find a way to do it that didn't involve what we've just talked about, taking the time to dig through all this material, right? You go
Yep.
to a Points Guy, you go to a CNN or wherever, there's a lot of terrific information, but it takes time to dig through it and find out what you need to
Yes.
know. I always wanted to be able, how can I answer this question when people ask, when do I use my miles? How do I use my miles in just a few seconds with
Okay.
technology? And that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing with PointsPath.
So now tell me a little bit more about what you're doing, the business model, because I have a lot of people that are very interested, and I think you're seeing this more and more. I myself am a product of this trend to where people who have either a skill or knowledge in a particular area and are relatively self-motivated are, and I would also argue naturally curious, are really starting to exit the corporate world, the normal 9 to 5, and then opt in to kind of do their own thing. And I think some of that has to do with technology. It's never been more profitable to be, if you are a solopreneur or have a couple people on staff, it's the productivity you are able to do nowadays compared to even 5 years ago is so dramatic just because the tech enables you to do so much more. So just curious, as you've kind of started off on this journey, leaving the traditional 9 to 5, walk me through a little bit of what that looked like when you were like, hey, I think I'm ready to take this dive to go into entrepreneurship. And then, walk me a little bit through that moment. Like what did that really look like for you and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, I always did feel, Stephen, like I had an entrepreneur streak in me, even though
Okay.
I had always really worked for. And actually, that's not even true. At the very beginning of my career, I had a small company that did stock footage. This was back in the '90s.
Okay.
So I actually, come to think of it, had that from the very beginning. But through a lot of my career, I had worked for big companies, and if you're making a movie, you kind of have to do it through a big company. Although, again, I did end up doing my own independent film at one point.
Well, very
So
cool.
actually, now that I'm talking it out, I guess I've been doing this all my life to some degree. And actually, I think that is what's great about society today is you can jump in and out. You can
Mm,
go do your own thing for a while,
it's a great
and
point.
then right? And then go back into the corporate world for a while, and then go back and find something else. Anyway, in this particular case, like I said, I always knew I wanted to find a way that I could help people use their miles without having to spend hours on it. The technology has improved drastically over in the ability to do this sort of thing. The resources are more available than they used to be. And I'll add one other thing. When you are working with a team, and I have a really terrific team of engineers and social media and PR and all these folks.
How many people did you start with? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
How many people did you start with? How long ago was it? Was it just you? Did somebody come with you? Whatever. And then, give me just real quick, like, how did you get to the point where you are now?
Yeah, so it started with just me, and I started in April 2023, so about 18 months ago, so not that long ago. Yeah, we're up to I believe it's 9 people.
Okay.
Not all full time, but they're all working more than half their time on this product, and and it grew over time. And I will say took a long time to find the right people. I had people come and go and where they weren't quite the right fit. And now I have a team that I love, I adore. They're really terrific. But it grows. You end up adding pieces as you need them. Right. So obviously one of the first pieces I needed was a tech person. I like to say I know just enough about coding to be dangerous. And so now I have a team where I say, hey, why don't we do it this way? And they say, Julian, you go do your thing and we'll fix this.
Nice.
But I really needed somebody who knew what they were doing from a coding perspective. And so that's who is my team lead now. And he's just really knows it. He gets it. But he also gets what we're trying to do, and he sees the product vision. And that's important too. And so you add the pieces as you go. And you get the people, and also I think you also, when you find somebody with talent and find somebody that's with value, you may find all of a sudden, I actually know exactly how I can use that person, how that person can fit into what I'm doing. And while I may have not had that to bring on right at this moment, I'm going to grab this person because I don't want to lose that talent.
Okay.
So that's something else. You want to be flexible as well. You make plans, but be open to replanning, if you will.
That's a good way to put
it. Yeah. So over time that we went from just me to, like I said, now we're at 9 people. And a lot of it is engineers because it is a technical product.
Yep.
But we do have, like I said, we're covering other spaces. And I think we'll probably grow more in the next 18 months. I'm sure we will. But I wouldn't be surprised if this team was 2 or 3 times as big 18 months from now.
Let me ask this. Why are you doing this? What is ultimately this for? Because we all love work, right? And if we're fortunate enough to, be super passionate about it, what we're doing, like what you do, and, with me, what I'm doing now, we're just passionate about doing these things. But that's normally when things, really really hits the fan, life's tough. We have personal lives that are going on, like ultimately, what is this? What is the point of all of this? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, man, it goes back to what we just were talking about. I love it when people travel. I love it when I get emails from people that say, you know what? I could never figure out how to use my miles, and I just finally booked a trip. And I thank you for this. And because I couldn't figure out how to do it. And now I'm going on this trip that I've never taken before, out to this place I've never been before. That makes it all worthwhile. It really does. Because you're right. It's a lot of work, and it's a long journey. And obviously, look, you got to make money too. It's not, we're not a nonprofit, but
well, yeah, absolutely.
Right. But my goal here is not to, blow the roof off of the economy or anything. My goal is to build a business that helps people be able to travel to places they couldn't go otherwise.
Okay.
Right. And the beauty of travel rewards is you can do that travel, whether you're in economy, whether you're in business, whatever it is. It's travel that you maybe couldn't do if you had to rely on cash because you don't have enough. So you use the points to fill in that gap. That's what I love. I love that.
I love that. Yeah. It's, there's money to be made in serving people, and in business, we should never be ashamed of making money. I find it really interesting how people will start a business and they feel bad asking people to pay them. And it's like, guys, it's like the majority of people I know that go to start a business, they kind of get the same face that you did right there. And it's just like, there's an element somewhere in there of either helping people or their businesses that they just gets them going, gets the juices flowing. But then it's like, you start talking to them about the money aspect of stuff, and there's almost like, feel bad about that. It's like, don't. It means you're providing value, you know?
Not only that, but here's the real secret. If you're providing value, you're providing a product that people want, they want to give you money. They want to support you. They want to say, because they want you to keep doing it and they want you to make it even better. So they're happy to. We just did an offering of our Founders Club and had a terrific response. And people were like, how do I get in? Even after we closed it, because it was a limited time thing. I was getting emails from people, how do I get in? I still want to get in. They want to give you the money if you're providing something that is of value.
Absolutely. And the other side of it too, and this is, a little bit of buyer psychology here, but for any entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs out there, there is a direct correlation to how much somebody pays for something and then how much they will actually utilize it. And that is something, I had things all along this journey. I'm like, look, I want to help people get clarity on what they want for their life and build a financial plan in order to be able to attain it. But I would give away all these resources for free. A couple times I even gave away like one of my courses for free that I had early on. And it was a disaster. Nobody ever took advantage of it. And when I say nobody, I mean there was one specific course, 2 hours of work. That's it. Like just forget binge watching, a couple episodes of your favorite show on a Wednesday night. You do this, you have a fully automated personal financial system. Like that's all you had to do, 2 hours. And I gave it away. I was at about 80, 85 people. Then I noticed a trend. I was like, I'm going to get to an even 100. So I just had that. One person out of 100 finished the course.
Wow.
That I gave to for free.
Wow.
It was worth $200. It was like, I'm giving you $200. It's only going to take you 2 hours to do it. This is something that is in desperate need of it, right? But because they didn't pay for it, they didn't put the priority on it. And that's something I think that's really important. So entrepreneurs out there, just know the majority of you are probably still undercharging. This is something I continue to see. Everybody's undercharging for some reason. But
listen, I put myself in that bucket. I think I'm undercharging too. But we are building out our tiers and really trying to see.
And it's different when you're starting off, right? I'm not saying you have to jump straight to it. Yeah. Absolutely.
But no, I agree. I think that you're 100% right on everything you just said. People value what they have paid for more than what they have gotten for free, and they do want to give you money for things they value.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, just in your personal life, at being an entrepreneur, working, different things like that. One of the things that I always talk to people is about, we have 4 primary resources: our time, energy, attention, and money. And society is always trying to take those things from us because society functions on those things. And part of society is our work, whether that's our own job or the 9 to 5 or whatever the case is, right? And work will always take as much as you give it. So for you, what things are important to you in your personal life? And then how do you go about making sure that you're paying attention and putting the time in on those things versus just, 24/7 work?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I struggled with it for a long time, even when I was in the corporate world. And I have come up with a way that works.
Okay.
And I think other people, and I didn't make this up. I've got it from other people. So I think a lot of people, have talked about it. Because I had a to-do list and I'd have personal things and business things. And of course, with all to-do lists, you'd end up not getting any of it done. And then you come back the next day, it was still the same to-do list. My secret is I calendar everything. Everything.
Oh, I love it. I knew we were going to be good friends here.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
My personal life, I calendar my business life, I calendar everything. So if you look at my calendar, people look at my calendar, they're like, oh my God, everything's so full. But it's because everything I do goes on that calendar. And that replaces my to-do list because it's on my calendar. And I have it all electronic, so my phone buzzes when I'm doing it. So then if I make sure, you say, well, you're going to spend time with your family, put it on the calendar. That may sound stupid, but it's not, because then when to stop work and go be with your family. Put it
totally
on your
agree.
Calendar. Yeah. That's more. Well, it's really made a difference for me. And look, again, like I said earlier, planning. If you're planning, you have to be willing to replan, and things move on my calendar, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they don't disappear. They're there. And so if they may move earlier or later or whatever, reorganize, but they're there. And when they're there, they do happen.
That's great. I think that is there's certain non-negotiables in success that I've learned. I don't know if I've ever said it out loud, but I might make this declaration now. So if I come back in a year and I regret this, and people start yelling, well, you said this one time. Hey, it's the first time I'm saying it, but I think I'm willing to go out on this limb at this point. I don't think it's possible to be as successful at anything, whether it's your business, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your health goals, whether it's whatever is important to you, whatever you have a goal for. I'm willing to put this stake in the ground here. I don't think you can be as successful with it as you want to if you are not calendaring every single element of it that you can, right? Obviously, like you said, things can change. I'm not saying that once it's on the calendar, it's permanent. No, not that. But I go back to, they talk about the 1,000-minute rule. Every single day, we have about 1,000 minutes to spend when you take away the time that we need for sleep. And by the way, you do need to be sleeping or you are inefficient.
Yes.
The sleep pandemic that we have in this in this world is unbelievable.
If you're not getting enough sleep, everything else takes twice as long.
How many hours a night do you get right now, and how many would you like to get?
Very consistently 7 hours a night, and I have been.
That's good.
Years. That's what my body gets. Yep.
Are you like an early bed or early to bed, early riser? Or how do you do it?
Late night, get up late. Yep. Nope.
Okay.
That's what my body does, but it's very consistent, and it is. And I know when it's time to go to sleep, and then my body knows when it's time to go awake. I use a sleep watch and all of that to monitor it all, and I'm very consistent with the 7 hours. And I know that some people have trouble sleeping, and I don't want to, minimize.
Yeah, there's always certain things, but let's be real. The majority of the problems that we have is we're stuffing our face with blue light, like right before. Yeah. We're stimulating our brains, doom scrolling social media, and then we're sitting there and going like, why can't I fall asleep? It's like you're literally doing everything wrong.
No, you gotta turn off the anxiety and turn off the brain. And again, I know it's easy.
Have you ever tried 4-7-8 breathing? Have you ever heard of that technique?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 4 in, hold 7. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. What is it? You inhale through the nose for 4 seconds.
Right. Yep.
Hold the breath for 7, and then breathe out for 8.
8. Yep.
That I discovered probably a little over a year ago has single-handedly been the thing responsible. I do that 6 to 8 times every night before I go to bed. Clears my brain, puts my body at like a different level of like low stress, puts me right to sleep. So if anybody out there is going, oh man, not doing well with the sleep, put your phone down, don't touch it, get it out of arm's range so you can't get it. I went and bought a old-fashioned alarm clock. So now my phone isn't even within arm's reach anymore if I need to see the time. Because what happens, right? You wake up in the morning, you look at your time, but you got all the notifications there. Automatically, your brain's in go mode. You're not giving yourself a chance to wake up. It's just instant stress.
That's right.
So,
Yep. No, that's smart. Yeah, use an old-fashioned alarm clock and put your phone somewhere where you'd actually have to get out of bed and start the day when you're
best $20 I've spent in the past year. It was awesome. Only to find out that my son, and apparently this is very common. He's 7. But apparently kids nowadays don't know how to read non-digital clocks, which I thought was interesting. But I guess it makes sense. Like,
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I hadn't heard
they just don't see analog clocks very much.
I guess they don't. Yeah.
So,
I like seeing those videos on social media where people are like, "What's this?" and they hold up a VHS tape, and young people are like, "I don't know, what is that?"
Do you have a football team that you're a fan of?
Yes, I'm from Miami, so I'm a Miami Dolphins guy.
Okay, you and my dad will get along great. So I became a Bucks fan just to be rebellious and not cheer for the team that my dad did. Right? I'm really the only. And I was young, and it's like Dolphins or Pirates. I mean, come on. So unfortunately, my team's winning more Super Bowls, so it's been good. I've stuck with them. I was a fan. I didn't jump on when Tom Brady came on. I was a fan before. So, but I forgot why I brought this up. Right, they had on their social media account, the Buccaneers this past year, they had all the rookies that they hired, and they were asking them questions like that. And dude, they started talking about the VHS tape, and these guys had no idea. And I'm like, no clue. This is so depressing.
Yeah, just glad they didn't show him an 8-track. Yeah.
Oh gosh, really even I would have a hard time recognizing. I'd probably be able to guess someone if I saw one, but I off the top of my head, I can't even remember. It's hilarious. What Let me ask you this. I know we're coming up here close to the end and everything, and this has been really fantastic information. I think super helpful for people. I love the mission that you have, just seeing, people's faces light up when they're traveling, enabling, that to happen. This is always something, though, I feel is a missing piece for people in their life, whether you're looking to leave and start your own business, or whether you're, just trying to, maybe travel more for your life, or whatever your life goals are. What did you do financially to be able to set yourself up to be able to make this jump? Clearly, like you said, entrepreneurship was something that had kind of always been boiling inside of you. You had dabbled into it on and off, kind of a thing. But I find the people that just quit one day or they get fired, start their own business, they have just that much hard. It's like entrepreneurship's hard enough as it is. To do it and not be financially prepared just makes it that much harder because you don't have enough runway. So, what did you do financially, and how far in advance were you thinking about doing this? When you started, your business.
Yeah. So interestingly, this business I did kind of leap, but it's having gone through everything we just talked about, I realize in retrospect, it's not the first time I've done this. And in previous times, I think what the real way to do it, the best way to do it, if you can, is to start it almost as a hobby. Like start it as a side gig where you don't quit your job and you don't, overhaul your entire financial health.
Did you know this might be a full-time thing when you started doing that? Or what did it start as a hobby first and then you were like, I might have something here?
See, this one was more of a leap where I said, I want to make this business and I'm going to go do it. But to go back to an earlier point in our conversation, when I made the transition from TV and film into points, and I talked about, I started writing for a blog. I didn't do that. I didn't suddenly quit Hollywood and go start writing for a blog. I started writing for a blog on the side while I was still working in Hollywood.
Okay. Yeah.
And because I think I was making, I don't know, $100 a post or something like that. It was nothing, but I was able to do it part-time as a side gig. And then eventually that grew into the new career. And it didn't happen immediately. If I just jumped, it probably would have been faster, but I also would have been broke. I mean, I've been able to feed myself. So it took a little extra time to do it, but I made that transition without having a financial shock. So I think that's a really great way to start a business. Just start it as a hobby, start it as a side gig and see how it grows.
I love that. Yes. I tell people all the time, it's like in my mastermind, one of the things that we always do is, the mastermind is built around basically building a 3-year strategy. So everything that we do is 3 years. It's like, okay, well, great. If you want to start your own business, you can start now. It's like, well, I can't quit my job full time. You don't need to.
Don't have to.
Do you know what your business is going to be called? Do you have a website? Do you have a logo? Do you know what your product offering is? No. Okay, great. You can do all those things now while you have a regular job. And there's no reason that you can't start, working your way towards that moment. When you quit, if you don't mind me asking, how much runway did you have financially? Like, did you give yourself, okay, I saved up 6 months expenses, to make sure I had that, a year, 2 years, or maybe you were cash flowing. You were like, I just want to make sure I'm cash flowing 60% of my monthly expenses, and then I'll make up the other 40 as I get this thing going. How did you financially prepare for that jump? Because that's one of the most common questions I get.
I did say to myself, that's a really good question. I did say to myself, if I do not have any traction within 6 months, then I'm going to go a different direction with this.
What did traction mean?
Traction meant that, first of all, had to actually have a product built, right?
Okay.
Because at the point I was starting from nothing, but not just a product built, but then at least the first users who were using it, and even if it wasn't perfect, it certainly wasn't in the first version. It's not perfect now. It's always improving. We're able to say, yeah, okay, this is what I want you to do differently, or this is what you need to fix, and I want to keep using this. Versus the difference would be a user who used it once and then never came back, and that's the difference. That's the direction.
So you had 6 months expenses saved to get you there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And look, I'm not going to say when I got to the end of 6 months, boom, I was breaking even and everything was good. I meant I still needed to make some things work financially. But it was there was a decision point where I know now that I think about it, thinking back, I said I got to be able to show some sort of traction here, or I need to go back.
I think that's a really big key because there's always this back and forth of the world of entrepreneurialism of like never quit, keep going. But then on the flip side, there's also the element of like fail fast and fail forward, and pivots happen. And I mean, since before I launched, I was in a little bit of a unique position financially when I quit, because the one thing I tell people, I actually wrote an article on my website about this just recently, about how the greatest side hustle is actually going fractional. And that's exactly what you did, right?
Yep.
You took your expertise and what you were good at, and then you just started working in that area in a different, mode essentially. And for me, it was different because I was coming from sales. I had been doing coaching on the side for 5 years, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it because of the NDAs and all the stuff that I had with my companies. So I said, I'm going to take an entire year off, not sell anything, and just brand build, because nobody knows me for this. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, if you're going to start something in the industry that you're coming from, it's like you're light years ahead because you have that credibility.
100%, right. Yeah.
I think that's huge. But the thing I love that you said is that even though you had that, even though you had some money saved up, even though you were still starting with that, you told yourself, I'm not just going to do this forever. My goal is that within 6 months, I've got recurring users. And I think that's a super important thing that people need to do when they're trying to start their own thing. Because if you don't have something like that, then you may just buy into this idea of, well, I just need to give more effort to it. And it's like, no, your offering might suck. Your product might suck. You may not understand your own brand or the business that you're in sometimes. And it's like, if you don't have a point of reflection that will stop you from that, you may just keep throwing more gas on the fire. So I love that you did that.
Yeah. And also, so you might have a great product and it's just not the right time. I mean, that happens too.
It's another great point.
It's just not the right time. And by the way, when we say 6 months or whatever it is, doesn't mean you have to get to the end of 6 months and be like, that's it, I quit forever.
Right.
Maybe it's a pivot. Maybe it's a pivot. Maybe it's saying, well, I'm not getting traction from this, but this is what I'm hearing from people. So maybe try something a little bit
People don't care. I thought people cared about flights. Turns out they care more about hotels. Okay, so I'm going to focus on that. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Exactly. So you just have to be aware, right? And you have to say, be honest with yourself. There is a sense of, look, entrepreneurship is hard. There are good days and bad days. And just because you have a couple bad days is certainly not a reason to say, oh, forget it, I quit. You got to look at the broad picture. But if you're banging your head against the wall and you're not getting any traction, then it is time to say, all right, what do we do differently here? Or maybe we do something totally different. And then one last thing to your point earlier about people saying, well, I can't, start a business now because I already have a job. And you say you named all those things you can be doing. Take an hour or two off of social media and do that instead. Build your brand, figure out your business plan. There's a lot of stuff you have to do before you can even really start building your product. So figure all that out. Take the time you'd otherwise just be burning on nothing and do it that.
I totally agree. I love it. Well, look, I really appreciate your time. I want to give you the last word here. Totally open. What message, tip, quote, whatever you want to share? What's something that you would want to scream from the mountaintops and blast to the audience?
Yeah, I'm going to go right back to where we started. Don't be afraid of credit cards. Don't be afraid of them. I understand what Dave Ramsey's saying, but it's not the right advice for everyone. If you are responsible with debt, if you can spend within your means, credit cards have a vast amount of rewards that they can offer, and usually often for free, or at the very least at a low cost. Obviously, make sure you're using the perks that you pay for if you do pay for them, but don't be afraid of credit cards.
I love it. And just my always go-to tip for everybody who might be a little scared of them. Guess what? There's this fancy thing called auto pay. And if you set that up every month, guess what?
That's right.
The bill's going to get paid no matter what. And when you know auto pay is on, you are less likely to auto spend over that limit because oh crap, that bill's going to get paid. I'm not going to be able to do it, whatever. So I totally agree with you. Like you said, put your recurring bills, your electric bill and, daycare and whatever, stick that on it. If these are for the people who have zero self-control. You have zero self-control. Get like some of your biggest monthly bills, stick it on there, chop up the credit card, okay? And just let those things hit every single month. Let it pay itself off every month, and then rack in the points and go have an epic experience with somebody that you love and have a great time, because
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
that's what we're here to do.
That's right. Throw it in a sock drawer. We do that all the time. You say,
That's
I know,
it.
I'll put some auto charges on it and auto pay. Throw the card itself in a sock drawer, and if you want to keep using your debit card for your daily expenses, that's up to you. But yeah, don't leave rewards on the table.
I have one last question that just came
Sure.
up. Is there, because I do know credit scores are a real thing, we do have to pay a little attention to that, and I'm sure you probably have some resources on this. So if you want to point us to anything like that, that's great. Is there, as far as you know, a how am I trying to say this? At what point can you have too many credit cards open? Because I know they say when you open a credit card, don't close it. I do know in the credit score, it's like, when I got to like 15 years or something, I got a big credit boost because I just had a line. I don't even use that credit card anymore. I just never closed it. But I think altogether, I probably have maybe 4 lines of credit that are still open. In your experience, what's the tilting point there?
Well, Stephen, right at this moment, I would guess I have about 26 open credit cards.
Okay.
Something like that.
and could you get a car loan if you need it?
And I would not have a problem getting another one tomorrow if I wanted to get one. Look, the key, at the end of the day, it's actually not usually the number of cards, it's the amount of overall credit. At some point, a bank will say, we are only going to, based on your income and things like that, we can issue you this much overall credit, whether that's on one credit card or split across 5 cards. It often can be up to you. You can even go to a bank if you've applied for a card and they say, well, we've already issued you as much credit as we're willing to do. You can call them up and say, well, listen, I'll lower my limit on one card to get this new card. And most of the time they'll do it. They're happy.
Because the debt to income ratio is really what they're looking at.
That's right. At the end of the day, they just don't want to be overexposed to too much debt based on your income. The number of cards, there are some limits, like American Express, you can't have more than 5 credit cards open. That doesn't include their charge cards. So add the charge cards, there's another 10 more you could have. There's business cards. The number of cards is not too much of a limit. It's the overall credit that you are being.
So would you just say, if you were going to, because like I had a hard time choosing between the Capital One Venture card and the Chase card. They were both great. They both had, it was neck and neck there, kind of thing as far as picking one. So it's like, there could be a lot of benefits for me to open up that one. So would you just say, yeah, if you want to play the points game and you want to do that, it's like, go in, sign up for one every 6 months, one a year, because obviously it docks your credit a little bit. So you don't want to do it too often. What would you recommend as far as a cadence and opening new ones?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you got to keep all this organized. So if that does take time as well. But yeah, to answer your question, I have both a Capital One Venture X and a Chase Sapphire Preferred, and I along with several other Capital One and Chase credit cards. I certainly do usually apply for at least 2 or 3 cards a year, unless I am coming up on, if I need to refinance my mortgage or something like that, then you do not want to be opening up
that's a really good point.
Within 3 to 6 months before that, because they'll ask you, why are you opening up credit cards? So that's something to keep in mind. Quiet down if you're coming up on a car loan or something like that. But beyond that, 2 to 3 cards. And in regards to your credit score, when you open a card, you will take a slight hit for about 3 to 6 months tops. It's only about 8 to 10 points. And then not only will it come back, but as long as you're using that credit responsibly, it will actually increase your score because you have a bigger limit. And even if it's the same amount or hopefully no debt, your debt to credit limit is now even better than it was because you now have more credit and the same amount of debt. So your score will increase over time. My score is almost 800 points. And I, again,
I'm over an 800 too. And a big part of that has been increasing my limit as I go. And again, a lot of these are on cards I don't even use anymore.
Right.
I just left them open. And now with my existing strategy, everything goes on the Capital One card. So if I were to sign up for the Chase one, I would spend a month, get the $5,000, whatever you need to get the bonus points. And then I would just go right back to whatever my de facto card needs to be. So
the only caveat I would make on that is if you have a card that has an annual fee, if you are not using it, then you rather than closing it, because like you said, you'll lose that limit, call up the bank and ask them to convert you to a card that has no annual fee.
Okay,
In most
that's a
cases,
good tip.
they can do that, and that way you're not burning the money, but you still have the credit line open. And in a lot of cases, the points will still be available depending on what the
Well, I mean, even that's interesting. Read the fine print, because one of the things that made me upgrade from the 95 to the 395 annual fee was the fact that if I upgraded the 395 annual fee, they gave me like a $300 travel credit right off the bat that I ended up using on the main trip. So I broke even on the extra $300 immediately. And then they said, I think with that one, I got an extra 10,000 points for every anniversary I had.
Yep.
So I was exactly like, well, right. There's my $100. So it was worth to upgrade, because I was like, I'm literally breaking even on all this. So it worked out pretty well.
As long as you're traveling and using those credits.
Exactly.
Miles,
as long as you're using it.
Yep. But 100%. Yeah, no, that's why I probably would never cancel my Venture X, as long as that's what because it pays for itself right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I love it. This has been super helpful. Where can people find you? We talked earlier in the episode, if you're somebody who's salivating and wants, loves your little internet tools like I do, and wants to see the tool that you've put out, where can people go to find you? And I will make sure that I have this all linked in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's real simple. You go to pointspath.com, points, P-A-T-H, no space.com. And we also are on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, all the main social channels, Twitter. So yeah, check us out there. And by all means, give it a try. It's free. So give it a try and let me know what you think. Email me, julian@pointspath.com. Let me know what you think. If you hate it, let me know what you hate about it. So
sometimes those are the most helpful ones, right?
Very
we love hearing the stuff that we put out there is great, but it's like, that's how we get better too, is constructive criticism.
That's right. You learn a lot and you make a better product from constructive criticism.
Awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I appreciate, this is the adventure for a reason, right? We're all on this crazy adventure called life together. And one of the things that makes it exciting is going somewhere else for a little adventure too. So I think this is going to be really valuable to people. And, I'm looking forward to hearing from some listeners, some feedback that they get from your site. I'm sure you'll get some.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Stephen. I appreciate it.
No problem.